Picture this. A man in his mid-60s sits at the edge of his bed on an ordinary Tuesday morning. He places both hands firmly on his knees. He takes a breath, he pushes himself upward and stands. Something that required zero thought at 45 now demands preparation at 65. Most men watching this will recognize that moment immediately. Some will recognize it from their own mornings. Others will recognize it from watching their father, their older brother, or a close friend navigate the same quiet struggle without ever naming it out loud. And here is what almost nobody has ever told them about that moment. It is not simply aging. It is a specific, identifiable, and in meaningful ways addressable biological process, one that a single exercise, requiring nothing more than a chair, addresses more directly and more completely than almost anything else in the research on healthy male aging after 60. Stay with me through everything that follows, because by the end of this, you will understand not just what this exercise is, but exactly why it works at a level that most fitness content aimed at men over 60 never reaches. Let us begin with the question that reframes everything. Why does getting up feel progressively harder after 60? Not suddenly, not dramatically, but quietly, gradually, in a way that most men notice only when they compare how they move today to how they remember moving a decade ago. Have you ever caught yourself using your hands to push up from a chair without consciously deciding to? Have you noticed that stairs that once required no thought now require a moment of mental preparation before the first step? Have you felt that subtle but persistent change in physical confidence that nobody warned you was coming? Most men attribute all of this simply to age, to the inevitable, to something that has no specific explanation and no meaningful response. But doctors and physical therapists who work with men over 60 see something more precise than age. They see a pattern, and that pattern points to 3 specific, interconnected physical changes happening simultaneously in the body after 60. Changes that together explain almost everything about why movement becomes more effortful, balance becomes less certain, and recovery from physical exertion takes longer than it once did. Think of the body at this stage like an old house that has not had the right kind of maintenance for several years. The foundation is solid. The structure is sound. But 3 specific systems have quietly degraded, not because the house is beyond repair, but because the particular attention those systems needed was never deliberately given. This is very common after 60, and identifying those 3 systems clearly is what makes the exercise we are about to discuss so specifically and so powerfully relevant. The first system is lower body muscle mass. After 60, the body loses muscle at a rate of approximately 1 to 2% per year without the right stimulus to maintain it. This process, called sarcopenia, does not announce itself with pain or obvious weakness in its early stages. It accumulates silently, and it concentrates most significantly in the large muscles of the thighs, the glutes, and the deep stabilizing muscles of the hip. The exact muscles responsible for every act of rising, every act of climbing, and every act of maintaining balance when the ground is uneven or the footing is uncertain. Here is what makes this loss so consequential beyond the obvious question of strength. Muscle is not passive tissue. It is metabolically active, meaning it plays a direct role in regulating blood sugar, supporting joint health, maintaining bone density, and preserving the cardiovascular efficiency that determines how a man feels not just during exercise, but throughout every waking hour. When that muscle quietly disappears, the downstream consequences reach far beyond the legs themselves. That is why the first physical change is not just about how hard it is to stand up. It is about what that difficulty signals about the broader metabolic and structural state of the body beneath it. The second system is lower body circulation. The large muscles of the legs, when they are active, contracting, moving, function as a peripheral pump for the venous blood that must travel back up from the extremities to the heart against the constant downward pull of gravity. When those muscles are less active and less robust than they once were, that pump becomes less efficient. Blood moves more slowly through the lower extremities. Fluid pools in the legs and ankles. The heaviness that most men over 60 notice by the afternoon, the sense that the legs are carrying more weight than they should, that the feet and ankles swell by the end of a long day, is in large part a circulation story, and the primary character in that story is the diminished muscular pump of the lower body. Here is the example that makes this clear. Imagine the circulatory system like a central heating system in that old house. The boiler, the heart, does the primary work, but the system depends on adequate pressure and flow throughout the entire network to function efficiently. When the peripheral pipes, the vessels in the lower extremities, have reduced muscular support driving flow back toward the source, the whole system works harder and delivers less efficiently to the parts that need it most. This is very common in men over 60. And most men managing this daily heaviness in the legs have never connected it to the specific mechanism of muscular pump insufficiency, or understood that targeted daily movement directly addresses that mechanism. The third system is proprioception, the body's ability to sense its own position in space. This is the least discussed of the three changes and the one that surprises men most when they understand what it actually means for daily life. Proprioception is the constant, real-time communication between the muscles, joints, and connective tissues of the body and the brain, the system that tells the brain where every part of the body is in space, what adjustments are needed to maintain balance, and how to respond to unexpected changes in surface or footing without conscious thought. When you are young, this system is fast, sensitive, and automatic. You step on an uneven surface, and your body adjusts without your brain ever consciously registering the challenge. You turn quickly, and your balance compensates without effort. After 60, without regular physical challenge that keeps this sensory system calibrated, the signals slow down. The adjustments become less automatic. The margin between a near miss and a fall narrows in ways that most men attribute to clumsiness or inattention, rather than to the specific neurological and musculoskeletal change that is actually occurring, that subtle hesitation before stepping off a curb, that slight uncertainty when turning on an unfamiliar surface, that instinct to reach for a railing that was not needed 10 years ago. These are proprioceptive signals, and they deserve a specific, targeted response rather than quiet acceptance. Now here is where those three systems connect to a single movement. Most men at this point in a video like this expect to hear about a complicated routine. A series of exercises requiring equipment, gym access, a fitness background, or a level of current physical confidence that may not feel accessible from where they are right now. What I am about to describe requires one thing: a sturdy chair, nothing else. The exercise is the sit to stand. And before that sounds too simple to take seriously, stay with what follows. Because the reason this single movement is so specifically and so comprehensively powerful has everything to do with the three systems we just discussed. And that specificity is what separates it from the general exercise advice most men over 60 have heard and dismissed as too vague to act on. The sit to stand is exactly what it sounds like. You sit toward the front edge of a sturdy chair, feet flat on the floor, approximately shoulder width apart. You lean slightly forward from the hips, not from the shoulders, from the hips. You press through your heels and rise to a full standing position without using your hands. You pause for 1 full second at the top, and then, and this is the most important instruction in the entire exercise, you lower yourself back down slowly, taking a full 3 to 4 seconds on the descent, maintaining full muscular control all the way back to seated. That is 1 repetition, but look carefully at what is happening during those few seconds. The quadriceps, the large muscles at the front of the thigh, are contracting forcefully to drive the body upward against gravity. The glutes are activating to extend the hip and bring the body to full upright. The deep core muscles are engaging simultaneously to stabilize the spine throughout the transition. The smaller stabilizing muscles of the ankle and foot are firing continuously to maintain balance through the movement from seated to standing and back again. Every major lower body muscle group is being loaded and activated together, not in isolation, not on a machine that removes the balance challenge and the stabilization demand. Together, in the exact functional pattern the body uses for virtually every physically meaningful activity of daily life. Think of it like the difference between practicing the individual instruments of an orchestra in separate rooms versus practicing them together as an ensemble. The individual practice has value, but it is the ensemble practice, the coordinated activation of all the parts in their natural working relationship, that builds the real world performance capacity the body actually needs. The sit to stand is ensemble practice for the lower body. And that is precisely why its effect on functional strength, balance, confidence, and daily physical ease is so much greater than the sum of its individual muscle activations. Now here is the part that most fitness content aimed at men over 60 completely misses, and it is the part that transforms this exercise from useful to genuinely powerful. The most important moment of the sit to stand is not the rising, it is the lowering. The slow, controlled, deliberate descent back into the chair, resisting gravity rather than surrendering to it, is what exercise scientists call an eccentric contraction. The muscle is generating force while simultaneously lengthening. And eccentric contractions are the most potent stimulus for muscle preservation and muscle rebuilding available to the human body, more potent, gram for gram of muscle tissue engaged, than concentric contraction of rising. Here is what most men do instinctively on the way down. They drop. The effort of rising is complete. The muscles release, and gravity does the rest. In that single habit, repeated across every chair in every room for years, they eliminate the most valuable half of the exercise without ever realizing what they are losing. 3 to 4 full seconds on the descent. Every single repetition, muscles engaged and resisting from the moment the body begins to lower until the moment it touches the seat. That one instruction alone, applied consistently, transforms the sit to stand from a functional movement into one of the most effective muscle-preserving exercises available to a man over 60. Without any additional equipment, without any additional time, without any change to the movement itself beyond one decision to slow down on the way down. This is very common. Most men rush the descent with no awareness of what they are sacrificing. Now you know. And knowing this changes every repetition from this point forward. Here is how to begin, simply, safely, and in a way that builds genuine and lasting results. 5 repetitions in the morning, just 5, done slowly, done with full attention, done with the deliberate 3 to 4 second descent that makes each repetition genuinely productive. If 5 feels manageable after 3 or 4 days, move to 8, then 10, then 12 over the following weeks. The progression is not about speed. It is about consistency and about the quality of each individual repetition rather than the total number. 10 perfect repetitions with a slow, controlled descent will produce more meaningful muscle stimulus than 20 rushed ones, done with a drop at the bottom. If rising without hands feels unsafe or unstable at the beginning, use the armrests lightly for assistance. There is no compromise in that. The goal is the movement, the muscular engagement, and the daily repetition. Use whatever support makes the movement safe, and reduce that support gradually as strength and balance, confidence build over the coming weeks. Drink a full glass of water before beginning. Muscle tissue is approximately 75% water, and the overnight fast leaves the body in a state of mild dehydration that meaningfully impairs both muscle function and joint lubrication. This is not a minor detail. It is a foundational one that changes the physical quality of the first repetition and every one that follows. Eat protein within an hour of completing the movement, not necessarily a large meal. Eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, a handful of nuts alongside something more substantial. but something that gives the body the amino acids it needs to act on the muscle stimulus the exercise just provided. Movement without adequate protein is the construction crew without building materials. Both are necessary. Neither alone is sufficient. Now here is how the three systems we discussed connect directly to what happens when this exercise is performed consistently over weeks and months. The lower body muscle loss that drives the difficulty of rising from a chair is directly addressed by the eccentric and concentric loading of the sit to stand, providing the mechanical stimulus that tells the body this muscle is needed, is being used, and should be maintained rather than further reduced. The circulatory insufficiency in the lower body is directly addressed by the muscular activation of the sit to stand, each repetition contracting the large muscles of the thigh and glute, and reactivating the peripheral pump that drives venous blood return from the lower extremities toward the heart, and the proprioceptive decline that reduces balance confidence and increases fall risk is directly addressed by the balance challenge inherent in the transition between seated and standing, training the sensory communication between the lower body and the brain with every single repetition, keeping that system calibrated and responsive in exactly the way that consistent physical challenge has always maintained it. One exercise, three systems, all addressed simultaneously every morning. From a chair that is already in the room, so here is where everything lands simply and completely. After 60, lower body muscle mass declines quietly and progressively. Circulation in the lower body becomes less efficient as the muscular pump that drives it weakens. And proprioception, the body's real-time sensory awareness of its own position and balance, becomes less sharp without regular deliberate physical challenge. These three changes together explain most of what men over 60 experience as the physical reality of aging. The effort required to rise, the heaviness in the legs by afternoon, the subtle shift in balance confidence that was not there a decade ago. The sit to stand done daily, done with full muscular engagement, done with a slow and deliberate descent, addresses all three of these changes simultaneously. It rebuilds the muscle, it reactivates the circulatory pump, it recalibrates the proprioceptive system. Every single morning with nothing more than a chair, 5 repetitions to begin, a glass of water before. Protein within the hour after. A slow 3 to 4 second descent on every repetition without exception. Not as a temporary intervention, not as a short-term fix before returning to the same habits. As a daily investment, the kind that compounds quietly over weeks and months into a meaningfully different physical experience of life after 60. Your body is still responding, still adapting, still capable of rebuilding something real and meaningful from exactly where it is right now. The research supports that. The biology supports that. And the thousands of men over 60 who have made this single movement a consistent daily practice and felt the difference in how they move through their day's support that with every morning they choose to begin again. The question is only whether today is the day you start. Have you tried the sit to stand before and noticed what it did for how you move and how you feel? Does that morning struggle at the edge of the bed feel familiar in your own life? Share your experience in the comments below, because what you share here matters genuinely, and another man reading today may find exactly the push he needed in your words.